Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Bowser. I am president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, which is co-sponsoring this community public forum on Thrive 2050 with the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, the Citizens Coordinating Committee for Friendship Heights, the Responsible Growth for Montgomery County, and with the Thrive 2050 Neighborhood Coalition. I want to thank all the co-sponsors for their support and for getting the word out about this important meeting. The reason why we're here tonight is that all of us, that the community needs more opportunities to express their opinions about the Thrive 2050 draft planning document. Many of us believe that there's an inadequate opportunity to make our views known at the planning board stage, where we didn't get an opportunity to comment on the planning board draft, and that the county council's town hall and the outreach that they're currently involved in has not been as inclusive as some of us would like. This evening, what we intend to do is give everybody who wants to speak a chance to speak, whether or not you're in support of the draft document or have a critique about the current draft that was forwarded from the Fed committee to the council. Everybody has a chance to speak. There'll be the ground rules are very simple. What we've come to expect in Montgomery County when we have these kinds of conversation, we want everybody to be civil, no attacks on any person. And we want the dialogue to be very constructive. This meeting is recorded, as you know, and will make the video available to the press, the county council, the planning board, and the county executive, who we hope will join us tonight. He expressed an interest in listening to our comments tonight. Each speaker has 4 minutes. You don't need to take all 4 minutes. If anybody has any written comments that they'd like to provide to a bigger audience, you're invited to send them to me at alanbowser@gmail.com. Put that in the chat. And we've created a website and we will list all the comments that come in. This is our public hearing. And so we want everybody to be able to take advantage of it. Well, that's about it. I want to just thank the sponsoring organizations again. And I'd ask at this point that Ed Aminetti, who is the president of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, will make some opening remarks before we get into our discussion. So Ed, please make some remarks.
I'll be real short. I just want to welcome everybody and thank everyone who's here. I couldn't be more happy or more inspired by the way the residents have come together to have their concerns heard throughout this process in the last months, all these months, and how intelligently we keep expressing all of our concerns and our views about Thrive and everything. Even when rebuffed, we persisted, we didn't go away, which is probably the most difficult undertaking that ordinary residents and working people and people with families and teams to coach and bosses to talk to and things like that. It's very difficult to do that, and we've done that. And I think there already is a winner here, and that's democracy and representative government in our county. We shouldn't be the ones to hold our own public hearings. We shouldn't be the ones to present hard evidence-based data. That's our government's job. And we shouldn't be the ones insisting that analyses are done properly and that issues are properly addressed. A new general plan is needed, but it doesn't have to be done quickly. It has to be done right. And I'm confident that the talented residents of our county have a great deal to offer in the process. And so I also agree with the sentiments that Alan just gave a moment ago. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ed. So the way we're going to do this evening is we're going to ask those of you who wish to speak to the group to use the raise your hand function, which you'll find on your Zoom screen under reactions. You just raise your hand like this, and I will call you as I see your name. We'll try to give you an opportunity, an idea of who is to speak first. Want everybody to mute their mics. We look forward to as many many presentations as possible. Everybody will get a chance to speak. So we have a couple of hands raised right now. So we're going to start this program with Diane Cameron, who is the first person to raise their hand. Diane, you've got 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alan, and thank you to the Civic Fed and the other groups. My name is Diane Cameron. I live in Kensington on Piscataway, Nacotchtan, and Anacostan land. I volunteer with several groups. My testimony today is solely my own testimony. I want to comment on the process for Thrive. Early on, I was part of several meetings with planning staff for Thrive, focused on doing more to highlight the role of the agricultural reserve, and also to promote adopting a no new highways policy. I have seen progress on both of those elements, and so I thank the planning staff for the earlier stages of Thrive. On the other hand, what the Fed committee has done on transportation is unacceptable and is going to thwart the stated goal of transportation and Thrive, which is to shift from being car-centric to people-centric. That's the goal that is stated, but does the transportation details within the Fed's version of Thrive achieve that? The answer is no. The Fed committee, under pressure from pro-highway forces, deleted a crucial policy text that the TAME Coalition had worked very hard, and along with many other groups, to include in Thrive. And here's what that text reads. The text that the Fed committee deleted reads as follows, quote, "Stop planning or constructing new highways or major road widenings for cars." And that's what we call the no new highways policy. County Executive Elrich wrote to the council in October supporting keeping this policy in Thrive, and also supporting removing proposed M83 highway from all the master plans as an immediate implementing action to implement this policy. And we thank County Executive Elrich for that support. And we ask the council to restore this no new highways policy to Thrive by deleting that policy. And by the way, there's substitute text that is not acceptable. What you are doing, I'm speaking now directly to the council members. By you deleting this policy, you are supporting fossil fuel infrastructure. You are supporting the county continuing to build and expand highways, and thus supporting worsening the climate crisis and worsening the social and economic injustices in this county. And so we are asking that you use your power to restore the no new highways policy to Thrive, and to take out of all of our master plans proposed but unbuilt new highways, starting with proposed M83 that threatens the children and families in Montgomery Village with asthma and with destroying their backyard forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Next person up is Vicky. You need to unmute, Vicky.
Thank you, Alan. I'm with the Institute for Sustainable Condominium Communities, which is a recently founded 501c3. There are approximately 377 condo associations with 3 or more units, with a total of 44,556 units. That's approximately 11% of the housing stock in Montgomery County. At least 80% of that housing stock is affordable in an owned housing situation to the less affluent population. I think the thing about which our group is most concerned is that Thrive 2050 defines the future audience that we have to provide housing for, and its options are very limited. They talked about rental housing, multifamily housing, owned multifamily housing, but did not focus at all on condominiums, which are the most affordable type of owned housing in Montgomery County today. And they are the type of affordable owned housing that creates legacy. If we do not want to create, I think in Montgomery County, if we're looking at a policy of inclusion and equity for everyone, we want to look at everyone having an opportunity for owned housing that they can afford, and that is condominiums. There is absolutely no focus on condominiums, providing condominium options for those of which 73% of the population will be of color. So I think the Thrive, we feel that the Thrive goal of providing housing that matches the population that they're anticipating, there is no match there. And building 3, 4, 5 unit condos in Chevy Chase is not going to provide affordable housing for anybody. So I think they're way off the mark when it comes to looking at getting affordable owned housing for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Joe Titlebaum.
Hi, Alan. Can you hear me? You hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm pleased to attend this session. I got to tell you, I didn't expect it. I'm not a member of the Civic Federation. I'm not a member of any of the groups that you mentioned there. I'm not even a Democrat. So I have no iron in the fire and politically in this whole Thrive situation. I live in West Silver Spring in the community of Greater Littonsville, and the small civic association neighborhood I live in is called Rosemary Hills. I'm concerned because everything that's in the Thrive, I agree with the ideals, what they would like to do in the best of all possible worlds. But I find the content, as a previous speaker mentioned, to not live up to the ideals of Thrive. In fact, I'm worried about the term Thrive used for this general plan, because I think it's a borrowed term. It's an ersatz term. It has nothing to do with what's actually going on. And my impression is, well, we've got some interference, but not on my side. My impression is that what Thrive says in its ideal form is contradicted oxymoronically in its content, particularly with regard to the suburbs. Where I live is suburban. We are outside of any urban perimeter. We are not next to an urban perimeter, about a mile or so away from Silver Spring, so-called downtown central business district, and a little more than that from the Bethesda central business district. And what I find is that there's an attempt to deliberately and surreptitiously urbanize our suburban, modest suburban housing areas and turn them into nodes as part of a greater urbanizing growth approach to take over the entire county and make it an urban place, not a suburban place, but do it piecemeal and not in an organized or participatory form. None of us have been asked if we would agree with those dominating factors in the Thrive content. And even when we try to talk to the planning department, what we get is deaf ears. The planning board, worse. And the county council, unfortunately, seems to be operating with groupthink on the assumption that this is a wonderful general plan, when in fact it's a mishmash and it will not achieve its ideal goals, and it will destroy many of the qualities of suburban Montgomery County. I am not against urban areas. I think they should be here, and I think they should be consolidated. They should not be scattered helter-skelter across the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Who else would like to speak? Use the raise your hand function. It's under reactions on your screen. And Vicky and Joel, if you could lower your hands, that would be great. We'd appreciate that. Don't all raise your hands at once. Who else would like to speak? Paul Ginnessy.
Hi.
Nice
So
to see you.
the only thing I would say is that I'm still waiting to hear a developer actually talk about Thrive, because this is one of the biggest changes to their industry in years. So why is it we don't hear anything from the developers? They can't all be that shy. So where are they? That's basically it.
Thank you, Paul. Peggy Dennis, would you like to say something? Peggy,
Okay, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay. The biggest concern that I have is one of the objectives of Thrive is to create more, quote, attainable, unquote, or affordable housing. I don't think it will work at all. I think it will be a miserable failure. No developer or builder takes on any project which will not allow him to maximize his profit. And when you maximize profit, taking, for instance, a half-acre lot, demolishing the home and putting in something much larger, you're not going to put in, for instance, 4 affordable homes. You will put in 4 units that are deluxe with the highest possible price. You will also take away a lot of the area for landscaping, trees, holding back the water on the property. I think it will be an environmental disaster and not achieve affordable housing at all. The council needs to look at raising the number of affordable units being required for any kind of large-scale projects. That's all I've got to say.
Here you go. Here you go. It's up on there.
Paul, we need you to mute your mic. Thank you. Peggy, do you have more to say? Peggy Dennis?
I'll unmute myself to say no. I've had my say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peggy. Jean Kavanaugh.
Gene, you're on mute.
Jean Kavanaugh.
Sorry, I promised Alan I would reread my testimony from the council's listening session. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Someone else mentioned, I'm in complete agreement with the 3 main goals of Thrive, one of which is environmental resiliency. However, I want to point out that Thrive has no dedicated chapter specifically addressing environmental protection and restoration during this era of ecological crisis. So I did ask the council to restore the planning staff chapter on the environment. Also, Thrive needs maps that show county watersheds and cover to identify inequities in areas that need protection and enhancement. So I think somebody has their mic on. The person on the phone, 598-1173. They could turn their mic off.
You want everybody to mute if you're not speaking. Fran, I just muted you. Please, Jean, continue.
Okay, thank you. So I noticed that the planning staff original Thrive draft, it seems to be missing from the planning department website on Thrive. If somebody saw it there, please let us all know and put it in the chat. So going back to Thrive, specifically in Thrive, the natural, green, and ecologically functioning systems we need are absent from chapters on complete communities, transportation, and housing, where we need these ecologically functioning systems most. Complete communities, for example, need widespread natural green infrastructure to improve air quality, absorb stormwater and clean streams, sequester carbon, and promote biodiversity, all of which in turn improve human health, food systems, and reduce greenhouse gases. Transportation corridors need tree canopy and Hello, turn off, can you mute yourself? Transportation corridors need tree canopy and natural stormwater management to cool the air, reduce flooding, and prolong the life of road surfaces. When increasing housing densities, we must be mindful of protecting our valuable mature trees and creating space for naturally functioning ecosystems that research shows enhance communities in ways already described. The council, including Fed members, of course, and the planning staff and planning board, they all know these things. You know, they're reading the research, they hear experts, they know this, but they seem to have ignored it in Thrive. Although tree canopy is listed as an evaluation criteria for chapters on parks and design, nowhere in the document are guidelines for how much canopy we need. I recommend setting tree canopy goals for urban, suburban, and rural settings, even for the industrial uses. Those can be customized through the master plan process, which is still essential as we go forward. The Parks Department is very important in the fight to limit impacts of climate change, but they alone cannot carry the burden. The responsibility for restoring tree canopies, sequestering carbon, and creating green corridors belongs to every resident, developer, builder, and government entity in the county. So those are some of my concerns about Thrive. I've heard a lot of concerns about the possibility of reducing or eliminating the master and sector plan process. So I would like to see strong language about keeping the master and sector plan process in Thrive. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jean. If you'd like to send us your testimony, we'll publish it on our website. Next up is Amanda Farber. Amanda, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the organizers of this event. I wanted to touch on a couple points, some of which others have brought up, and some new points I want to make. And I have said some of these points during earlier meetings, but I think they're worth repeating. First of all, is a quote directly from the Fed version of the Thrive draft. And it says Montgomery County has a lot going for it, yet there is room for improvement. And in my mind, the same thing can be said about Thrive. There is a lot going for it in there, but there's definitely room for improvement in the language of the document. We absolutely do need a new general plan. That's clear, but we need one that has more community support and buy-in rather than a plan that has caused this much division. I was heavily involved when the Bethesda sector plan was being written. And I'll say that plan had a number of work sessions council. And it was at that point in time where people really came together and the community got on board with the plan. Was it perfect? No, but there was definitely a feeling that the community had a lot more say and involvement and buy-in on that plan. And so my hope would be for Thrive to get to that same place. As Jean mentioned, I feel like there's a number of missing components and language in the document that's rather glaring. When the chapter on the environment and the chapter on the economy was pulled and essentially sort of scattered throughout versus having dedicated chapters on those, I think that was a change for the worse. But then going through, there's some specific things that stand out. So for example, there is right now the terms Potomac River, Patuxent River, Chesapeake Bay, Little Seneca Lake, 10 Mile Creek, Rock Creek. None of those actually appear in Thrive except for Potomac River. That term appears once in the appendix and it's not even referring to the actual Potomac River. So that's an area where, you know, our watersheds are extremely important. Our drinking water sources are extremely important. Yes, the county has a separate 10-year-old water resources plan, but there's absolutely no reason why that sort of information should not be included in a document like Thrive. And one of the reasons that I really delved into the language is because I started to read other area general plans that were written recently. And I encourage everybody to have a look at them. It takes time, and everybody does it a little bit differently. But PG County was done in 2014, Frederick County, 2019, Anne Arundel County, 2021, very recent plan. Howard County is undergoing theirs now. Even across the river, you have Fairfax County, they did theirs in 2017. And again, even though all those different counties do things differently, it was really eye-opening to see what is included in those plans and what is missing from Thrive. So thank you. I appreciate having the time to say that.
Thank you very much, Amanda. That was very helpful. Nancy Abeles, please.
Hi, everybody. I kind of feel like I've said everything about certain things that I have to say about the plan, but I want to comment on the listening session because I was struck by something very strongly that if you listen to the two camps, the supporters versus the skeptics, it divided down demographic lines. And it seems like this plan has succeeded very greatly at polarizing the county population. The predominant demographic like tonight is older people like us who have lived in this county a very long time. I've lived here about 40 years, been a homeowner for almost that amount of time. And we see how things work here. We have a context and we have skin in the game. The people who support the plan seem to be predominantly very young people, and they saw this only on an altruistic level. As Mr. Teitelbaum, I think it was, who said earlier, the ideals are worthy, but somehow or other, it's almost like fake news that these people are convinced, I think in very large part due to certain particular quote unquote nonprofit interest groups who have pushed this plan and have tremendous influence and power over council members and the planners. They're convinced that this is just going to magically fix everything. I am connected to the planning arena. I'm involved.
What do you want, Lori? Stop screaming.
Yeah, stop screaming, Lori. Okay. I'm involved in the planning department in the transportation arena, and I have exposure to things like studies from the Urban Land Institute, and they have documented through data statistically that plans like this do not increase the racial balance. And in this case, because of the cost of land and the way things are in Montgomery County, it doesn't seem like this plan is going to create greater economic balance in existing communities either. So I wish, there has to be attention paid to, as I said, what's promulgated in Thrive is almost like fake news, that it's a magic Disneyland explanation of how to fix things when things are actually far more interrelated and complex. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I don't see any hands up now. I see we've been joined by our county executive. Mr. Executive, would you like to say a few words to the group?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Civic Federation for putting this together. It's good to be able for people to get heard. And I know this has been a very frustrating process. Doing this in the middle of COVID is, at least in my mind, inexcusable, just because for most of this time period, people have been fixated in I'm going to wake up alive tomorrow, and are me and my family and my loved ones going to be safe? And to throw in, let's rezone the entire county. And I know some people are going to say they're not rezoning. That comes with the next legislation, which is primed to be dropped as soon as Thrive is passed. It's kind of hard to ask people to focus on this when we were in the midst of COVID, and there's no hurry. There's clearly no emergency that this is going to affect. And we should have done this with full discussions. There should have been neighborhood charrettes. There should have been opportunities for people to meet face to face and do all the things that was done in previous planning processes. I served on one of the, a couple actually of the master plan committees in Silver Spring. And I know what a community process is, and I know how people work through differences of opinion. And I know the value of hearing people's voices and sitting in meetings and working things out with people in the community. And I know that when you have a planning chair who rewrites the draft and disregards public testimony, you really don't have a product that's reflective of what people think in the community. I think there's some, misinformation on, I know there's misinformation on both sides to some extent. If some people worry about housing values going down, I see this is more or less leading to more expensive neighborhoods, not less expensive neighborhoods. I worry more about the segregating things than desegregating things. So I think, there are some different perspectives of what the effect of this is. But it's important that people in the community actually do get heard. I wish the council would slow this down. I hope at some point they can come back to in-person meetings and, give the public a chance and basically take this on the road, set up meetings in different parts of the county and do this in a way that's convenient for people to show up at a high school. I don't know, some of you are old enough, probably a lot of you are old enough to remember in the great debate over Silver Spring, which is a highly controversial issue just about Silver Spring. The planning board had a meeting at Northwood High School where they literally filled the gym at Northwood High School for people wanting to hear the discussion. And that's the least you can do for something which is affecting the entire county. So I hope that we can evolve toward a more open process. There's no rush. I think hearing from people is going to be a positive thing. My staff's been working on it. I've been working on it. Our folks, folks from my administration are listening to this meeting. We want to, hear different opinions on this. But, like I said, I continue to be, concerned about the process. Just as a starting point.
An ad for tea. It looked like it was going to be an ad for.
And there's some irony to me to listen to the planning board talking about smart growth and all this other stuff when, they zone Cabin Branch, even as, just a couple of months ago, they went against the master plan recommendations for 10 Mile Creek to put more density on 10 Mile Creek. I don't understand how density in Boyd's serves any kind of smart growth objectives. There's a whole bunch of stuff that just is logically inconsistent. And I know from, reading the same studies other people have referenced here, that all the evidence is that the kind of things people are talking about doing are not going to result in affordable housing. And I think you don't have to look any further than the planning board's words itself, because when they first started talking about missing middle, it started out, well, everybody thinks missing middle is about affordable housing. And I think that's why there's a lot of folks in the community, of course, who say, yes, we should do missing middle. Missing middle is about affordable housing. And then you realize that when the planning board realized they want to get affordable housing, they turned missing middle into missing housing types. And I've got to say that I don't think anybody ever left Montgomery County because they couldn't find a triplex. We've gone from affordable housing to not affordable housing. And there's a statement that's associated with Thrive that basically says we have to end our sole focus on affordable housing. This county never has had a sole focus on affordable housing. So I kind of feel like the goalpost got switched. It got turned into something that isn't affordable housing. A lot of the public still thinks it's about affordable housing. It's important to get these kind of discussions out in the open and have a real discussion about whether or not it's about affordable housing. What's the purpose and intent of doing this that wouldn't be accomplished if we built out under our existing master plans, which, by the way, account for the future growth of the population of Montgomery County. It's those plans that are actually the basis for the growth projections. So you didn't need a zoning fix to deal with providing housing in the county. We need other things to make sure that housing gets built in the county, but this is not the starting point for that. So I'm very interested in this and will be paying attention and happy to engage with people.
Thank you very much, Mr. County Executive, for joining us this evening. We have three. Okay, Lloyd, we'll get to you in a second. We've got a list now. Barbara Sosnick has contacted me in the chat. She's been trying to get recognition. So Barbara, please begin.
Thank you. Barbara Sosnick. I live in Old Woodside, and I agree 100% with Joel Teitelbaum. The plans for at least Silver Spring and maybe beyond are no less than a destruction of suburbs, as many of us know that. In an urbanization of Montgomery County, we have an urban area. It's called the District of Columbia. And there's not a lack of diversity of housing, especially in Silver Spring. There are thousands of high-rise units. So it's really kind of incredible, to hear and see that, allegedly we need more when it's right on our doorstep, not to mention that apparently the commercial buildings in downtown that are vacant. The proposed zoning will destroy single-family neighborhoods. They're certainly not compatible with neighborhoods such as Woodside. It ignores that denser housing in already dense neighborhoods such as ours will result in even more overcrowding of roads and schools. In terms of affordability, I agree with the county executive, and thank you so much for your comments. And if we truly want to look at affordable housing, I suggest that perhaps a focus ought to be on not something that would ultimately crash real estate values, and I don't think anybody wants that, but to look at a further subsidization and not just of impoverished people, but of lower middle class, working class people to help people to be able to afford to live in neighborhoods such as this. And lastly, I would like all of us who have problems with these proposals to look at how we can have this process be more accountable, because I don't think it's enough for us to just comment vociferously and be, quote, listened to, but really to have some kind of a mechanism so that a requirement that somehow perhaps, I don't know, I'd say even a referendum at some point, because comments, if the planning people, are hell bent on a certain way of looking at things, then I'm not sure that our comments are really going to be have effect in the long term. And thank you all for your participation and efforts in this.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for your comments. We've got queued up Karen Cordry, Mary Blocker, Diana Conway, and Carrie Lamari. I know that Brenda Freeman, you had raised your hand. If you'd like to speak, Brenda, please raise your hand with Zoom. Karen Cordry, would you go next?
Sure. When I was growing up, there was Mad Magazine, and one of its lines used to be, the standard motto is, don't just stand there, do something. Well, I think theirs was the one that said, don't just do something, stand there. And in some respects, I think that kind of applies to what we're looking at right now. This process has been plowing ahead full speed. And I think there's a lot of things. This has been a very strange time period to be trying to do Thrive. Obviously, it starts with COVID, and COVID may go away, but what I think it has done is change what might have been a thought experiment before. Oh, what if more people stayed home? What if we could have more scattered communities? What if? And it's transformed it very much into reality. Over the last 2 years, we have learned we can do things very differently than what we have ever done them in the past. And I think a lot of that is not going to go back, even if COVID goes away. And I don't really think that the current planning board's draft and what's being considered at this point in Thrive really takes a lot of that into account. So I think a lot of the things we're concerned about with the housing also may change very much depending on where our economics and our commuting patterns go over the next few years. So I think there's really some need to actually step back and think about some of these things a bit. Certainly there are pieces of what's in Thrive, the environmental pieces and so forth, that are being separately dealt with by the county and probably do need to have continued focused attention on them. But it's not necessarily clear to me that we're really in a very good position right at the moment to decide what's going to happen in this county over the next 30 years, because we certainly couldn't have predicted the last 2 years. That said, there's a lot of things with these housing initiatives that I think all of us have concerns with. And we keep getting told that, well, don't worry, that's different from Thrive. Well, it'd be easier to believe that if we didn't have a zoning initiative that started before Thrive, if we didn't have one still being proposed during Thrive, if Thrive doesn't completely tie itself into housing changes and so forth. So I think what most of us do, there's no one who's against the goal of more affordable housing and varieties of housing types and so forth. But I think most of us, and maybe the point about most of us being older, is you've had a chance to see the good ideas sometimes don't work out so well if you just try to go gung-ho full speed ahead. I think our notion is some pilot projects, some much more focused attention to the county, some really trying some of these things through master plans to be able to determine. For instance, the notion of duplexes, triplexes, quads, and so forth on empty land is probably perfectly viable. I thought it sounded great the first time I read it, and then we started looking at the practicalities. But when you're talking about doing it as spot at a time infill in existing neighborhoods where the basic effect would be to take away the most affordable existing housing, and as the studies seem to suggest, put in more expensive new housing that there's no guarantee you'd even keep as much affordable housing as you did. That's the sort of thing that I think you need to have a lot more planning, a lot more focus, try it in some spots and find out how you can make this work. Because we have certainly been hearing from other locations that just one size fits all. My line has always been the field of dreams approach, pass it and they will build it, probably isn't the best way of going about all this. So I think that's really our suggestion. Slow down, step back a step or two, and really think this through. Try it and find out, are there developers that want to build this? Are there banks that want to bankroll these sorts of things? And put it all together, we can make this work. What we've got right now, I think, is just a very divisive document that is really not pulling the county together. Thanks.
On.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. Next up, Mary Blocker. Mary, please.
I'm Mary Blocker. I live in North Woodside in Silver Spring. And we're pretty close to a metro and would be affected by this. I think we have a problem in this country of inequality and segregation. And I think that if we could make it so that our housing wasn't so segregated along income lines, that would be a great goal. I don't think Thrive does that. I think what the lady right before me talked about, that what will happen is you're going to tear down the cheapest house in a neighborhood and you're going to build some fancy townhouse there that's going to cost much more money.
That's what
I
think.
really think that we are a strong enough county where we can put in some kind of law that says that for any major development, 50% of the apartments or the units have to be affordable, really affordable. And I mean that because we just built a building off of Connecticut Avenue, not just north of East West Highway, which has workforce housing, right? So a 2-bedroom apartment there for workforce housing, I guess that's for teachers and firemen, policemen, workforce housing, costs $2,400 a month. You can get next to the White Flint Metro or the Twin Brook Metro in a gorgeous apartment house with lots of amenities, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment for $1,900 a month. So what are we talking about? That is not workforce housing. People usually can't afford something that's more than 3 times their annual salary. So that means if you make $100,000 a year, which is, not poor, you need a house that costs $300,000 a year. Where in our neighborhoods do we have these? I think we need a law that says that 50% of all units will be truly affordable. If we do that, and you want to put more housing in our neighborhoods, in our close-in neighborhoods, I think that's fine. We could have duplexes, we could have quadruplexes, but to fool ourselves and think that by passing Thrive, we're going to reach this goal and we're not going to just have fancy schmancy townhouses, I think we're going down the wrong path. And I wish we could make our decisions based on reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Next on our list is Diana Conway. Diana?
Hi, sorry I got on late, so I apologize if this is repeat. I think a common problem for our side of these kinds of conversations is that we talk to each other, and on one hand it's very empowering and we educate each other, but on the other I would love to hear some conservation about a strategy on how do we go at the council. I mean, when I found out, for example, they moved it from the 15th to the 14th, I texted all the council members who will speak to me and said, this is an unforced error. Why are you guys doing this? There's already so much upset. Now you're making it harder for people to attend because they've made other plans, whether it's babysitting or whatever. I just feel like clearly everybody's upset. How we communicate that to the council is going to drive how successful we are in pushing back on this, whether we're able to get the council to review it or they send it back. And I would just love to hear thoughts on strategy for that. I mean, we're coming up to election season. People should be a little more alert to the concerns of voters, especially engaged, active voters, like, people in this kind of group. So first, thank you to the Civic Fed for pulling this in. I mean, the attendance is, I'm looking at 91 participants according to my phone, and that's terrific. I just don't know if, I worry that we often talk to each other. I think everybody agrees the green infrastructure thing, how could they possibly take that out? Amanda's list of the tiny number of times any of the key environmental components of our entire region are even mentioned. And I know Caroline feel the steam coming out of her ears on the ag reserve. Hi, Caroline. So please, let's also talk about how to go at this hammer and tongs in terms of strategy. So thank you for letting me jump in like that. I'll go off.
It's great to see you, Diana. Carrie Lamari, you're next, then Jerry Garson, and then Brenda. Carrie Lamari.
Thank you, Alan. As I said before we started this, I've been involved in this for 2 years. Been writing articles, posting, researching, posting articles on how upzoning has affected other communities across the country, hoping that somehow we could have some kind of dialogue. I mean, Diana's correct. We don't talk to each other, we talk at each other. And in Montgomery County, we have a hell of a way to talk at each other. Disparaging remarks, accusations of racism, accusations of agendas. It's just not the way it used to be. I mean, I remember Neil Potter saying that, you know, in Montgomery County, when we deal with these kind of issues, it's a pendulum. It goes all the way one way, then all the way the other. I don't know where it's going in Thrive. I've never seen the toxicity that currently exists. The way I see Thrive is it doesn't hit the mark. You have a document with outlines, essentially, with headings, and then all the substance is in this thing called the action report. If you want to talk about the environment, you want to talk about the economy, you want to talk about affordability, it's all in the action report. And we don't get to the action report for up to 7 years. So the council's not even voting on the action report. So it's wonderful to hear, you know, Mr. Anderson talk about stormwater management. It's all going to be like Pike and Rose. And we have to prove that, hey, you know, these individual lots, lot to lot flooding, it's not like Pike and Rose. I don't know what to say. I've been saying it all summer. I've written hundreds of articles in responsible growth. Some of you have read them. Hopefully most of you. It's got to change. Now, with respect to affordability, attainable housing is not going to do it. When I was on the HEAT group, I was asked to be on the HEAT group by the Civic Federation. And when I mentioned, look, we should talk about unintended consequences, I was told, no, we're not here to talk about unintended consequences. We're here to talk about how to make attainable housing move forward, how to make it work, how to satisfy the developers so they'll actually build it. If you listen to the Brookings Institute, MIT, look at the New York study, every time they've implemented a blanket upzoning approach, which is what we're doing in Montgomery County, the demographics change from people of color to primarily white and Asian. The cost of land goes up, the cost of housing goes up. We create gentrification. Is that what we want for Montgomery County? And then when people talk about the character of their communities, their neighborhoods, all of a sudden there's this cloud that hovers you that, oh, you must be racist, or you must not want diversity. I'm going to close by saying this. When zoning was initially created, it was created by wealthy financiers who didn't want to have oil tankers and trains and, well, not oil tankers, but big industry in their urban area, because that's all we had is urban communities. Then in the 40s, the developers the financiers and the realtors started to bring in the exclusionary aspects of zoning. Okay? Now, move forward 80 years or 60 years, I can't even remember. Yeah, 80 years. We have inclusive, we have diverse, and to a good part, depending on where you live, affordable communities. And what do the financiers, the developers, and the real estate people want to do? They want to create a new paradigm of growth, a new situation where they can slice and dice our neighborhoods, our communities, create more expensive condominiums, and displace the diversity that we have. Whoa, that's not right. That's all I've got to say. I've been talking for months and months and months. You've heard it. It's time that we as a community come together and just lay it on the line. This Thrive is not acceptable as it is written. Let's come back together. Let's do it. Let's do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Carrie put together a Facebook page called Responsible Growth from Montgomery County. It's been a good source of reference materials. We commend it to your attention. Coming up, we're going to have Jerry Garson, Brenda Freeman, and Paul Bienfeld. Jerry?
Electric cars will account for 50% of the new vehicles sold in 8 years from now. Many people in Montgomery County regularly buy new vehicles, especially if you could afford to live in Montgomery County. You'd often want to buy a new vehicle as opposed to an old vehicle. There is no consideration of the electric vehicle's impacts will be, such as the problems for the new housing units that will only have one parking spot for each unit. That means if you have two people with electric cars, only one can be charged at night. It doesn't quite work unless you're going to reduce how you can only charge one car at a time. Where are the current the electric charging stations going to be for people who only have the one car? Are we going to have curbside, something like parking meters that will actually connect to electric cables that will electric charge the cars on the street? No one seems to consider this. We're talking about a 29-year plan, but within the next 8 years, we're going to have a significant number of new cars. And if you look at how many Teslas and Bolts and Hyundais and other electric vehicles you see in Montgomery County, how is this going to quite work? I mean, if we're saying this is a planning document for the next 29 years, are they blind that they can't see that electric cars are already here? They don't even give any figures on how many electric cars are here and how many will be sold in Montgomery County within the next 8 years. And once you get to 50% of the new cars, you're going to have some major problems. If you start putting electric meters on the street, where are they going to go? Are we going to provide curbside parking? Is this going to be a county function? Is this going to be a function? Most of our electric lines in my neighborhood are about 65 years old. I don't even know they can take the additional demand of electricity. And if you're looking for affordable housing, you also want affordable parking meters to charge. And how is the county going to charge a fee plus the electricity charge? I mean, all this should be discussed. This is not a document for the future. This is a document for the past. Yes, if you live near the Purple Line, which someday it might be built, maybe in 2026 or so, but in 2030, we're going to have 50% electric cars. You got to start thinking, where is all the electricity going to be? Are we going to redesign the streets for this? Are we going to turn two-way streets into one-way streets because so many people are going to be parked on the street? And we have a lot of existing people who live here who don't have places to charge their cars. They park on-street parking. You got to plan ahead. And this document should be thrown in the garbage can until they can start looking at what you can plan ahead. I mean, if they want to talk about trolley cars, and maybe we can build a lot of trolley cars. Well, my grandfather drove a horse-drawn trolley car in the 1800s. But we're approaching a 2120, 2130, 2140, 2150. You got to think ahead, not what happened 100, 150 years ago. I thank you for the time, and I thank Marc Elrich for the good job he's did in explaining some of these problems.
Thank you, Jerry Garson. Next person up is Brenda Freeman. Brenda, nice to see you.
Thank you. Have to clear my throat, but one of the things, a recurring comment in this session has been polarization, racism, covenants, and all of these divisive topics. I say that they are strategies that the Thrive proposal is using. Get people at each other's throats so we won't look at what they're doing. When they talk about diversity in Silver Spring, Montgomery County, Bethesda, wherever, Montgomery County in general, Down County where we are, is very diverse. Then you have, I think it was Nancy that mentioned the age, the polarization based on age. Well, there is no discussion or mention in the Thrive about seniors. So it seems like we're just aside, and maybe that's why the younger people are upset, because they feel that seniors are holding up just to be selfish. The point is that none of us were given anything. We weren't given our homes. Everybody had down some money and pay a payment. I don't care where you live in Montgomery County. And now we have a group of young people who feel that they have to have places right away. I have even heard during the testimony on the 30th, a young man who already lived in Montgomery County, he lived in, I guess it was Wheaton, rousing because he wasn't in downtown Silver Spring. So there's a certain set of reality and maybe maturity that is lacking. And I don't think that there's going to be any help from the people who are putting together Thrive. So what I would like to say is that what we have to do is figure out how to hold ourselves together and not back down. This Thrive cannot go. It is a disaster, and it's not going to be attainable or affordable. It's going to wreck our environment. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Paula Bienfeld.
Thanks. First, I just want to thank Alan and Ed and Carrie for pulling this together. And Carrie, I know, and others, the huge amount of work that people have been working on with Thrive. And Kim Purcell, I guess she's not on the call, but she also has been just relentless and doing just a tremendous job. So I really appreciate what you guys have been doing, and to have this is really a wonderful, voice of the people. So one thing I just wanted to point out as just a fact is that the Coalition for Smarter Growth, which seems to have a undue influence here and at the state planning level, is actually their fiduciary agent is the Piedmont Environmental Council. So they're pretty close with the Piedmont Environmental Council. And the goal of the Piedmont Environmental Council, which is out in, I think, like Winchester, Virginia, is to keep their region nice, pristine, rural, and push all the development down into our county. So they must be thrilled with Thrive to see that their goals are really being met. So I just wanted to clarify that. I did want to say that when you look at the report itself, the maps, as with the redistricting maps, are not helpful. They're not good. There are a lot of assertions in the plan, and there are no references and no backup for the assertions that they're making in the plan. Most of the references are from the Montgomery County Planning Department. So to me, that's just, sort of some basic things that should be made clear in the plan itself as a document. It just falls short. And the other thing I would say is that the emphasis on the density along transit corridors really just reifies the structural racism, carries it over from when those transit corridors and the stops, like on the metro, were first decided. it doesn't really kind of dissolve or sort of make dissolute what goes on in the county and historically what has gone on. It just makes it seems to me more rigid. Unless you change the transit and make it further to the west in the wealthier parts of the county, nothing really in terms of equity can change. And Diana, I don't know if she's still on the call, Diana Conway, but she brought up, what could we do now? And I wonder if the Civic Fed could take the lead in terms of writing a response and a report. And I know, Ellen, you know too, and Jerry, when I was president and Jerry worked really hard on this, we had a response for Ike Leggett's BRT proposals. And I wonder if it's a lot of work, but I wonder if the Civic Fed could work, and I'd be happy to volunteer to work on a written report as a response to this, because I think there is still some time. And the last thing I wanted to say is I think structurally, we're in this position where a small group of unelected people, i.e. the planning board and particularly the chair, are almost, in charge of all the decisions that the county makes. They're in charge of the housing, the transportation, the roads, the vision, structurally, it seems we've kind of come to the end of the road with the planning board. And I think, although I don't know the history totally of the Civic Fed, but I'm pretty sure the Civic Fed at the very beginning of the, much decades and decades ago, probably had a hand in possibly creating MNCPPC. Carrie or Jerry might know more, or Alan, about this. But I think the power that this small group of unelected people have in this county it's not democratic. It's, unconscionable, I think, as residents. Thank you. And thanks again, everybody who's been working so hard on this Thrive plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Next is Carla Steinborn, and Lloyd, you go after her. Carla?
Yep. Okay. I've heard a lot of wonderful comments. The trouble is they don't matter, because all that matters is how the council votes, and all that seems to be considered is what the chair of the planning board wants to say. If we look at Thrive 2050 in terms of its actual substance, well, I started to say it doesn't do anything, but actually it only does one thing. And we're always hearing from members of the Fed, from Mr. Anderson, that it's a vision document. Well, a vision is not an accomplishment. A vision is not action, and a vision is not a program. So I'm really interested in what Thrive will actually do. And it's pretty clear at this point that Thrive will immediately only do one thing. It will change zoning to give developers the power to build duplexes and triplexes wherever they want to, as long as a simple majority of the council says it's okay to do that in that place. So when we're being told by the chair of the Fed and by the planning board chair that Thrive is not about zoning, the real truth is that's the only thing that Thrive is about. That's the only thing that will happen if Thrive is passed. As you all probably know, there already is a zoning text amendment ready to go. I believe it's Friendship Heights that is going to be the first target, and our 60 zones, which are the most affordable. So that's what Thrive will do. And we also know from, well, a lot of sources, but from Gwen Wright herself, that they're already ruling out the wealthiest areas of the county. I mean, she pointed to the area around River Road, north of the district, said, well, those are big lots. We're not going to do this there. And then she pointed at the whole up county area and said, we're not going to do this there. So this is something that's being aimed at working class areas. many of which already have affordable homes. And Thrive will allow developers on their own in any targeted area to tear down those affordable homes, which we're, by the way, not supposed to be doing, and replace them with non-affordable duplexes and triplexes. And we know they won't be affordable because on many occasions, the planning board and the planning department have admitted that. So I'm taking them at their word. They're going to replace affordable homes in stepping stone neighborhoods like mine, where people can finally get into some form of ownership. And then years later, I've had neighbors who moved to Potomac, you know, and these weren't rich people, but they built up something. You need to have that entry. So that's the substance of Thrive, the way I see it. The next thing is the process of Thrive. Well, many organizations have submitted lengthy, detailed, well-supported documents to the county council and to the planning board about the deficiencies of Thrive. And there has been no response in any forum to any of them, including the one submitted on June 11th by Mr. Elrich, the county executive. And in the so-called listening sessions, they've done everything they can do to prevent any real exchange of ideas. They even shut down the chat because evidently they do not want the public to hear what other members of the public are saying. And I can't think of any good reason for shutting down the chat other than suppressing discussion. And then, of course, we're being constantly told that Thrive has nothing to do with zoning. Well, that just isn't true. They've even cherry picked the studies, and they're going to areas like Minneapolis where their ideas have completely failed. But if they can find one person there who'll say, oh, this was great, then they cite that as evidence. So that's the substance and that's the process. The third thing is, well, what can we do? And who is this really for? Well, who is it for? There's only one group that's really going to come out ahead, and that's big ticket developers. This gives them what they're beginning to lose. There's only so many places where they can build McMansions. You know, replace the 500K house with a $1.2 million house. So they're crying for more places where they can make money. And it was even said at one of the planning board sessions, the only way they could get developers to buy into Thrive was to give them this power to do that in working class neighborhoods, because that's what it really is. They're not going to build $1 million McMansion, say in Aspen Hill, because people with $1 million aren't going to want to live in Aspen Hill next to their roofer. But they can build $1 million triplex or duplex in Aspen Hill and walk away with gobs and gobs of money. So that is who this is for. And I'm not going to speculate out loud out of time. So the last thing is what we can do. And that's where the real problem is. I don't know what we can do except try to get the members of the county council who are sincere and really do care. And there are some of them, get them to either delay voting on this or be willing to vote against it. Because even the county executive cannot undo it if the county council does that. So we've just got to find a way to reach our representatives. And there is a group of people that's been meeting with them, but it's very helpful of any of you that are in their area and they're your representative to actually speak with them or somehow make them know how you feel about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. It's good to see you again. Lloyd, please.
I'd like to talk about three things. First, I'd like to talk about the lack of responsiveness on the part of the planning staff, the planning board, and some members of the county council. We commonly hear the word, they've had outreach, they've had this many meetings. That kind of statement goes way back. It goes back before the days of Roland Stanley, when he used to talk about all the outreach he did. The outreach he did really was dog and pony shows. A lot of people have submitted very good, detailed, substantive comments. They have not been responded to. Carrie Lamari said that. Carla just said that. I will simply mention, without going into details, I said, why does the discussion in Thrive on complete communities not address schools? No response. Why does the discussion on complete communities not address where the parks are going to be? No response. How could you do this as a zoning text amendment or something such as in the East County, when several of the master plans recognize that you have to do it neighborhood by neighborhood, and if you don't, you're going to tear down affordable housing and replace it with expensive housing. The county executive, probably about a half hour ago, used the word disregarded public testimony. They have totally disregarded public testimony. They haven't responded to it at all. My second concern is what they've called this and what should be done about this. As others have mentioned, they have said it's not zoning. They have said it is one word, and I want to thank the taxpayers. Max, you're interrupting me.
Raise it.
Can you turn? Can you hear me? Okay. They've said it's a vision. Hans Riemer called it just a bunch of ideas. In one of the Taxpayer League's discussions with a council member, he said it's a hypothetical. It's none of those. As others have mentioned, it's land use and ZTAs will follow. We should come up with a formula for fixing this. There have been a lot of good ideas. The opening of this should say it is only a guide. It is a vision. We should make them honor their words. It may apply in some places. It will not apply in other places. This document should always use the word should. Third, as someone else said in some of the sessions that the Taxpayers League held, there should be an express statement that all of this should be applied, not simply through a ZTA, but through various plans that affect individual neighborhoods. Master plans, some neighborhoods like mine, by the way, are not directly under a master plan. So before any of this is applied to any particular neighborhood, it should be discussed, and then it should go before the county council. So there should be in Thrive at the beginning, at least these 3 points. The third point that I'd like to address, if you'll indulge me, Alan, is how this is a giveaway to the developers. What did the developers do? Well, they sort of got some of the so-called smart growth people to say some of the things they wanted. They got no parking. They got more density. They got this. They got the power if they get what's in some of these ETAs to build a triplex in the community. Won't even know about a building permit till it's post. The developers, what have they given? They've given nothing. We need more ideas on more NPDUs, more set-asides for low income. This thing has to be totally rebalanced towards the people and away from the developers. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Next on our list is Max Bronstein. Max, please. Max, you have to unmute. Max, you have to unmute. Because we can't hear you, Max, until you unmute. Yeah, we'll give you a second to see if Susan can help. I'd like to ask everybody else who's still on the call to, if you have something to say, please raise your hand. It's the best way to handle our traffic. Max, don't give up, but you need to unmute.
Max, can you hear us? Nod if you can hear us.
Yeah, he hears us. He has to.
Okay, to unmute, move your mouse down toward the bottom of the screen and you'll see reactions. Click on reaction. No, that's wrong. Shoot. Over at the bottom left, you'll see the mute button and unmute yourself.
Bottom left of the screen, Max. Max, why don't you get Susan, because I know that she was helping you with that before. And Maggie, are you ready to talk to us? Thank you.
Yes, and I think I'm unmuted. Hi, everybody. My name is Maggie Flowers. I live near the Forest Glen Metro. I am, a resident of East County, and I actually, because I'm new to civic engagement in the area, was not speaking on this call. I came to learn more, but what I'm hearing is there is a sense of consensus amongst the group that everyone in our Civic Association Federation is against Thrive. And I am speaking up because I am not. I am in support of Thrive. I've been in the DC area since 2007 and in the East County since 2015, when we were finally able to afford a home. We wanted to live in DC, we couldn't. There's across the board lack of affordable housing in the entire DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. We lucked out. We found a very small 800 square foot fixer-upper in East County near the Metro for around $300,000. But now the value of the neighborhood has shifted dramatically. It's increased due to the pandemic. We've had 2 children, would love to have a bigger home. I cannot, as a federal employee, purchase a new home. It's not possible. We need to do something about this. I understand there may be issues with Thrive. I know that there's opportunities to make it better, but we need something. We need more housing. We need to address economic inequality in the county. And so while I haven't been here for 40 years, as many on the call have mentioned that they have, I am very committed to making this community better, especially for all of the young kids who live here, for the families that live here, for the immigrants who've moved here from El Salvador and Ethiopia, who are trying to do their best for their family and cannot afford to live here, who have to live in far, far, far out county in order to be able to afford anything and then get to their job in DC or Silver Spring or wherever it may be. And so, I'd love to hear the Civic Federation really start thinking through how can we support the county in making this a plan that we like, in addressing the concerns to make sure that everybody who lives in Montgomery County can afford it, can find safe, walkable communities and support their families.
Thank you very much, Maggie. That was an important voice. We appreciate it. Max, are you ready to talk to us?
It was to launch 7 years ago, but delays come with a machine this ambitious.
Sylvia, would you like to talk to us?
It was canceled.
No, I'm trying to mute. I just, sorry.
That's okay. Karen Cordry, please.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to that last person there, that I think no one disagrees with that concept. And I think what we're all trying to say is that just this global, just pass this up zoning and somehow what you want, what we all want is going to result. I think most of us think we're going to get the exact opposite of that. You're going to get gentrification. You're going to get even higher prices. You're not going to get this being built. It's going to take more work than just passing something and assuming it's going to do the trick. I live in the Wheaton area. Our civic association surrounds the Wheaton Mall there. And we do have, I guess, it's close to passing for affordable housing around here. We still have houses under $500,000, but we have no vacant lots. If you took those and started tearing down that housing and trying to rebuild, I think you'd get the same sort of notion as what they're talking about when they looked at Silver Spring. You'd get 2 or 3 houses, all of which would be as expensive or more expensive, but much smaller than what was already there. But on the other hand, I look at the fact, on Georgia Avenue, we have a huge self-storage unit right there. I mean, that's a crazy use of frontage on Georgia Avenue just below the Metro. It's the sort of thing that somebody ought to be looking at in a very detailed way and saying, is that the sort of thing we ought to encourage that party to move out, redevelop that land with some real density there in a very useful spot right near the Metro and downtown. We do have an 800 unit building that is going to be going in just on the north side of the mall that is going to be breaking ground relatively soon. There's tens of thousands of units of housing that's been approved. If those aren't going in, we should really be concentrating on why aren't those being built? What do we need to do to get that moving forward? Rather than assuming that that this upzoning, which has been extremely divisive, and we keep getting told, well, don't worry that much about it because probably nobody's going to build it anyway. So we have a very divisive process that probably isn't going to accomplish anything anyway, and we're not really concentrating on how do we actually get what we all want, which is more affordable housing. I mean, I would never dispute that there's a lot of issues for people trying to come into this county and raise a family in some of these areas and so forth. But I think a lot of what's being proposed at this point is just too abstract, too unfocused, not really getting to the heart of it. And that's what I think all of us are saying on this side. Let's really actually start trying to do what we're talking about as opposed to just passing these very gauzy pie in the sky sort of things and assuming we're going to get what we want. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Karen. The county executive would like to speak to us again. Marc Elrich.
Thank you. I got a couple of things that I'd just like to add to this. One is, if you want to understand growth projections, because a lot of this is about not having housing, and I understand people's concerns about not having housing, but zoning is not the answer to not having housing. Unfortunately, Karen kind of alluded to it, but there's like over 40,000 housing units in a pipeline, which means all somebody has to do is go in and pull a permit and build a housing unit. There's 85,000 more units, more buildings, more units, I guess you'd put it, that are already in the master plans beside the 44,000. We don't lack for the ability to build. What we've been lacking is demand at the price the builders want to build. So if you read Park and Planning's report about White Flint and you listen to the developer comments about why they haven't built all the housing they were zoned to build, it has to do with lack of demand at the price they want. And because I know that a lot of people say, what do you mean there's no demand? There is plenty of demand for affordable housing or for reasonably priced housing. But the demand for the upper end housing isn't there. And if you can only build high rises, what you're pretty much only going to get is expensive upper rate housing. It amuses me to listen to the planning board vexing about segregation. When you look at the zoning in Bethesda on the condominiums being built there, we already have 2, and it looks like we're going to wind up with 4, where the condominium builders are saying they want to be exempted from the MPDU requirements and give us a cash payment so they can build the units someplace else because the tenants can't afford the condo fees in the buildings. So they have to give us by law a certain number of units, but at the right price. But the price doesn't include the condo fee. And so when they tack on $1,000 condo fee, a person who would qualify for an MPDU can no longer pay the price of an MPDU plus the condo fee. So if they were so concerned about this, they could require that the condo fee be included in what's considered affordable that we get from the developers. But of course, that's not going to happen. But we'll find out because we're going to introduce legislation that would require that. But it's one of the things that, just really, I would say, disingenuous about their arguments. If you go to my website, I think it's on my county website, I have a long discussion that was with the Council of Governments where I actually walked the head of I was on the Transportation Planning Board. I walked them through how they came about their projections for growth, who's coming here in the 30-year cycle. So, they have projections for 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050. and who's coming here. And he will tell you, if you listen to the discussion, that everything is based on existing zoning. So they're telling you that the growth in the county has already been planned for. So it's not like you need the zoning to fix it. The other thing is when they talk about doing this around neighborhoods, they're forgetting that all the zoning is actually in the so-called activity centers. It was only a year and a half ago, when activity centers was the center of the universe, and that's where they were going to pack all the zoning, which is places like Wheaton, Glenmont, all the places where zoning was planned. And from an environmental perspective, if all your growth, or most of your growth, was targeted for those areas which are already concreted over, you have very little additional environmental impact. It would be hard to put more imperviousness into Silver Spring or into Wheaton or into Glenmont. And so if you wanted environmentally sustainable growth close to transit, we would put it where we already planned it. The idea of bleeding that growth off, which is probably the more expensive growth, into neighborhoods they would build along the major arteries where there's a bus stop, is kind of antithetical to saying you wanted to build out your activity centers where there was transit and where there were jobs, which leads to another problem with the plan. You turn everybody into a commuter. Unless you're going to build high-rise office buildings or dense office development in these neighborhood areas, everybody has to leave that in order to get to work. If those same housing units were built where they were planned in the metro policy areas and the other activity centers, there's a possibility that there will be jobs there for the people who are going to live there. So there's so much wrong with this that's antithetical to what they said they were doing in the original plans we've been doing. And I was on the council for 12 years doing master plans. We did all this work to plan out growth in the county based on smart growth principles. And now they're throwing all that stuff out and claiming that building along George Avenue, for example, is smart growth, without regard for the fact that everybody will have to leave George Avenue in order to get a job. And if those units had been built in Wheaton or some other of the activity centers, they have the possibility of getting a job there or being right on top of transit. Anyway, there's a lot that people have got to pay attention to in this. And I hope, you'll see more from us on that. So I hope we can, I hope we can have a meaningful discussion about this. But thank you for giving me another chance to throw those other pieces in.
Thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. We're going to go to Max Bronstein. Max, you're going to have to unmute. And then we'll go to Diane and then to Carrie Lamari. And Max, you are not unmuted yet. You're back on, but you're not unmuted. Now, there you go.
Well, thank you very much for your patience. I must have sneezed and the screen disappeared. So my guru on computers, Susan, got us back. I just wanted to make a few observations. One of them in regard to Mr. Anderson, who's chair of the planning board. Bear in mind that the other 4 commissioners only come in once a week to work on cases usually. And so he has a very heavy weight on the decisions that are made by the planning board. Back up a little and realize that the commissioners of the planning board are appointed by the county council. So the county council appoints those that are in line primarily with their agenda and their thoughts and their leanings. So that's where you need to apply the warmth to get people on the planning board. And perhaps if you can make all of them equal commissioners, Mr. Anderson makes somewhere in the neighborhood of $210,000 a year. I think the other commissioners make what, 35 or so? So something's out of whack there. Another observation I want to make is this. With some exceptions, and there have been some very good comments from all those who have spoken already, but we have to bear in mind that when we criticize a plan, we have to voice alternatives. What are our better suggestions rather than the ones that have been put forth by the Thrive plan? We should have a plan going forward which they come out with in the county about every 30 years or so. Maybe instead of calling it Thrive, which sounds like a restaurant ad, we should call it Montgomery County's Plans for the Future for the next 30 years or whatever.
Vertical scroll bar. Cheryl Gannon. I put it in the chat. Cheryl Gannon. Mocking people. 840 people. Cheryl Gannon.
That's not me or not an echo.
Rows. Command of
So we have to come up with alternatives and suggestions rather than just criticize what's been put forward. Another thing to bear in mind is that.
Okay, Max, wait a second, Max. Max. Max, I need you to unmute again. I muted everybody. Can you unmute again?
Okay.
There you go. That's good. Thank you.
So again, continuing my remarks, the council is going to have 2 more members. We're going to have 11 total members of the county council rather than the present 9. So I communicated in a long email the other day to the county council and many of the leaders of the county and leading prominent residents that have voices on this, and said, let's wait on making a final decision on this plan that you call Thrive. Let's leave it up to the new council and let them be in office for 3 to 6 months, so all of us, including them, get a chance to do a better or bring forth a better plan. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Max. Diane Cameron, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I have a couple of points in response to others, to Diana Conway's request for strategy. I agree with those who have said we need to delay. We need to hit the pause button on Thrive and delay council action. And until there is a much more thorough community-based process for envisioning our general plan. And I have another point about the need for affordable housing, which is affordable to people of all income tiers, including the lowest income tiers. And that is an extremely important goal for our county that Thrive does. Again, I think we've all agreed that Thrive talks about that goal and talks about housing for all, but when in the details, it's lacking. And I have 2 points about that to illustrate how much it's lacking. A great number of people who are in financial distress, they have physical or other disabilities. So people with disabilities have a great need for affordable housing and other county services. And the planning of our land use plan, our general plan, thinking about affordable housing for low income people needs to grapple with the physical environment and landscape of especially our urban areas, and how will people with disabilities navigate our denser urban areas. So that's a huge issue. Another example is for many low income residents now and in the future will have many different needs for social services, different from the needs of middle and upper income people. For example, returning citizens who are returning from incarceration, who I do support, freeing people from incarceration, who are in for nonviolent crimes. I think that that is a social issue that relates to land use planning and housing. And it's not enough to provide low income, lower cost housing, which we need to provide. We need to provide accessible services for returning citizens and other people who have suffered trauma. we need to service those families in many ways. And it needs to be localized and distributed to all of our different neighborhoods, not forcing people to ride a 2-hour bus ride to get to the other part of the county to a single regional center. So those are all land use planning considerations that I don't think Thrive has addressed in the context of meeting our low-income housing needs.
Thank you very much, Diane. Carrie Lamari.
Okay. I guess I didn't make myself clear the last time. Thrive is a hollow document. It's nothing but a bunch of headings. All the substance is in the action report, and their council's not voting on the action report. The action report is the list of, it's the substance of Thrive, and it's to be reviewed by agencies in the future, additional public hearing, and voted on. And the Fed committee said they may not get to most of those for 7 to 10 years. So forget about affordable housing. What Thrive gives you today, it gives you the parks and recreations, because that's the purview of the planning board. The action, which is also the attainable housing proposal, that's an action item. That will be on the heels of Thrive. So that will be one of the first things that gets addressed. Now, to understand all this, Marc was right. We currently have 44,800 housing units in the pipeline. And some of them are being built right now or being acted upon, like the 8,600 units over the metro. You got 5,000 over in Viva White Oak. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. Marc was also right. We have 85,000 development units now that have been identified by Park and Planning. The applicants just have to apply for the subdivision. They get it. And bear in mind, the 44,800 units, that's enough housing for well over 120,000 people. Okay, now get that. Then you have the COG report. The COG report says we need housing in the next 30 years for 200,000 people. Well, we've already got 100,000 approved in the pipeline, and housing for another 200,000 with the 85,000 units that are identified. So we really don't need the attainable housing units unless we want to develop strategies for affordable housing. Now, when we talk about affordable housing in Montgomery County, or even housing in general, you have to target it. If we want to have upzoning, and we make upzoning across the board blanketed, that increases the value of the property, because now people have development rights alongside of their properties. They can build 2 additional units or 3 additional units, so their property is more valuable. That raises the cost. That also creates the incentive for the property landlords that rent out naturally occurring affordable housing to say, hey, why family, even though that family needs that property because he's got a truck and a business and the rest of it, that the landlord doesn't care. He's like, I can build 2 additional units on that property and rent it to 3 properties, 3 families. Instead of getting that $1,500 to $1,800 a month for the entire property, I'll get close to $6,000 a month to renting it to 3 properties. So out the family goes, go find yourself another piece of property. That's called displacement. And that's what Thrive promotes. That is how this occurs. Look, we've been growing for the past 10 years at a rate of 0.66%. Understand, our job growth has only grown 0.24%. Thrive doesn't consider all that. It creates an imbalance. It creates more cost, more taxes. Thrive needs a lot of work, and it's not going to create affordable housing, and it will, as a result, just hurt the environment unless we deal with those action items that address stormwater management, quantity as well as quality, tree canopy, and on and on. I hope I've made myself clear at this point. Thrive, we can't thrive with Thrive. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Vicky, would you like to say something else? Vicky, you're muted.
Back again. There we go. Thank you. I'm sorry. One of the biggest problems is I have yet to hear, we have to be very careful. Affordable housing means one thing. In the genre of housing, it means rental. Whenever you go to the Affordable Housing Conference, the only thing discussed is rental housing. We have got to stop using that word because we don't need rental housing as much as we need owned affordable housing. We need to create legacy. You cannot ever do better if you don't own your home. That is the main way that Americans have gotten ahead in this country, is by investing in their homes. We've got to stop using the word affordable because they're getting it confused and thinking we're discussing rentables. We are trying to get affordable owned housing in this county. And that if you start creating these small groups of 3 and 4 duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, whatever, they will not be sustainable because, folks, I worked on the Distressed Communities Task Force for Montgomery County. And unless you have 50 units in a housing complex that shares its amenities, its utilities, its roof, its landscaping, unless you have 50 units, they are not sustainable. In a small community, you have even one person that doesn't pay their fees, and the community as a whole, none of them trying to sell their units can get a lender to finance it because it is higher than is allowed by the FHA for a percentage of people who are in arrears. So if you have 15% of a community that's in arrears, you have a community of 5. You have one person in arrears and somebody tries to sell their unit. You can't sell it unless you sell it to somebody who wants to come in and have an investment property. There are some realities that this particular document is not addressing. The reality is you cannot build these small groups of homes and expect them to be sustainable. If we want affordable owned housing, we need to look and follow the rules for making certain that it's going to be here for more than 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. I was muted myself. I've asked if anybody has any other comments, please raise their hand. We've had over 100 people on the call over the course of the evening. I think that's very good. I think it shows that there's a lot of interest in this and a lot of questions about the draft and the process. The Civic Federation has passed a resolution, several resolutions on the process. We've asked the county council to hold more public hearings to solicit more community input. And we've also asked them to be a little more rigorous in their analysis. We were interested in the environmental impact. We were interested in the racial diversity aspect. We were interested in the fiscal aspect. A recent report from the county council staff suggested that full implementation of Thrive over the course of the next 30 years would cost billions of dollars, raising the questions of how they're going to finance that, given our current tax framework. As Carrie suggested, to the extent that properties become more valuable, they can be taxed at their highest and best use. And so we are concerned about that. We'd like to see more realism and more discussion about the draft plan. Are there any more comments this evening about any aspects of the Thrive document, the Thrive process? I've been encouraged by the work that people are doing privately. I mean, I stand with, I think Carrie made Ed made the comment at the outset that we shouldn't be here in this position. There should have been adequate public consultations, opportunities for engagement, and that civic activists should not have to do their own research on projects like this. But I'm encouraged by the work that people like Amanda Farber and Gene Kavanaugh are doing on green infrastructure, some aspects of a plan that are not included in the current document. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as we come up to 9 o'clock in the evening on a Sunday? I see Jameson Adcock. Welcome, Jameson. Nice to see you and your cat. Please make a comment. You're muted, Jameson. You're still muted, Jameson. There you go. Then you muted yourself again. Okay.
Okay. Don't know how that happened. As I said, I'm a computer scientist. This should be pretty straightforward. I'm probably going to echo a lot of what was said tonight, but I will also echo what I said to the county council when I testified a few days back. And that is that I should be one of the people who is most in favor of Thrive, and I'm not. And the big problems I have are the process, doing this during a pandemic, and what there's a group of people who say, oh, well, we've been involved. Why weren't you all involved? And I find that I find it heartless, honestly, because there have been people who have been sick. There have been people who've been suffering economic fallout from the pandemic. There have been people wrestling with depression, anxiety. You run down the whole list. We've all seen it for the last 2 years. And I think that's a really horrible time to rush through what is going to be a 30-year general plan. And so I would say, just like many other people have said, let's slow this down so we get it right. Nobody should be excluded because they were dealing with all the difficulties that come along with the pandemic. And I think that the sense that people throughout the county get is this process is not legitimate. It feels forced. It feels rushed. And when you have something where you're talking about a vision that's actually a legal basis for future planning and master plans, sector plans, the whole 9 yards, this is something we need to get right. We need to take our time. And people have pointed out tonight that the plans that other jurisdictions are doing around us in neighboring counties are much more comprehensive. They have action plans, they have metrics, they have a whole bunch of things that are lacking in Thrive. Again, the process just feels so forced. And I'm going to make a call right now. The planning process in this county needs to be reformed. You should not have one person go and rewrite an entire document. I mean, I know some lawyers have a much higher opinion of themselves, but nobody is that good. I mean, I think the Department of Transportation should have been involved. I think Department of Environmental Protection should be very much involved. And why is it that we're just racing this through and not talking to the people who may know something and can add to this plan, the things that we want? We want an environmentally resilient plan. We want something that will allow this economy to grow. I can say as a software engineer, I've watched the jobs migrate across the Potomac or up into Howard County. So we do have a problem. And just planning by, I'll call it faith-based planning. We're just going to take a blind leap and, oh, it'll work out. Just vote for it. Again, I'm probably echoing a lot of the things that are said tonight. But the one thing I do want to say as I wrap up is I'm really disgusted by the tone that this whole discussion has taken, the nastiness. There are people who they just scream epithets at anyone who disagrees. We're not all, Breitbart readers. For those who enjoy Breitbart, I'm not. but in a progressive county, tarring the opposition and saying, "Oh, they're racist or classist," and they read Breitbart. How do you have a reasonable discussion when you have people who are just shrilly screaming and Where are the adults in the room? Why is the county council playing footsie? Not all of them, but many of them are in the same chat rooms with these people. And, you know, the planning board chief says, well, I don't think NIMBY is a derogatory term. I think it's a descriptive term. And then he turns around in the Bethesda Beat article and decries the lack of civility and the tone of the debate. And I'm like, dude, do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? I mean, you know, and I'm sorry if I sound upset, but I've been watching this for the past 6 months. And that's how long I've known about Thrive. And I'm just, this is not how any of this should work. And I think we all want to see something better. We want to see a more civil debate, because personally, I know that we need a general plan, and I think we want a good plan. And I think a lot of us are in agreement about the goals of Thrive. Many of us don't think that we're going to get there, because this plan, it has holes in it that you could drive a truck through. So I would say to anybody from the county, you know, government that might be listening, please slow down and let's get this right. There's no reason this has to be done and passed by January. Let's take the time to get it right. And then we can actually have a plan that maybe will get someone some awards, but more importantly, will serve the residents of this county well. Thank you. And Alan, thank you and the Civic Federation for putting this together. It's a shame that, you know, again, the process feels so cooked that, you know, civic activists need to come out and give people a platform where they can be heard.
Thank you so much, Jameson. I agree with you, I think 100%. So as does, apparently Carrie does too. So thank you so much. Does anybody else have anything to say for the good of the order? If not, we will conclude. Carrie, do you want to say something else? Or are you just waving goodbye? What are you doing, Carrie? Well, you have to unmute because we can't read your lips. Well, I think he might have gone off. Well, I want to thank everybody who joined our community public forum on Thrive 2050. We will upload this video to YouTube and send it to the county council members, the members of the planning board, and to the county executive for their information. I'm pleased to say that our group was larger than the session from the planning board and from the county council. I'm also pleased to note that we gave more time to individual speakers than did the county council. I think it's an example of what we need to do. More people need to speak and they need to have more time to speak, and our elected officials and appointed officials need to listen more. For those of you who are interested in the work of the Civic Federation, you can find out more about us at montgomerycivic.org. Tomorrow night is our December general meeting. Our guest is Montgomery County Police Chief Marcus Jones. And we'd like to have people join us for that meeting by Zoom. You can find the link on the Civic Federation's Facebook page by Googling Montgomery County Civic Federation, getting the link and joining us at tomorrow's meeting. So again, thanks to our sponsors, the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, the Citizens Coordinating Committee for Friendship Heights, Responsible Growth for Montgomery County. A special thanks to our county executive who took time out of his busy schedule to join us, and thanks to all of you. We will do this again. Everybody take care. And thank you, Doreen Pastor, for helping us with the technology. We appreciate it. Good night, everybody.